My name is Myrna Skolny and welcome to my fourth video on early Staffordshire pottery. Today we're going to be looking at Politos and Wombles menageries. For collectors of early Staffordshire, that word menagerie evokes an instant thrill, but early menageries charm even those who have absolutely no interest in owning them. They are almost as rare as hen's teeth, so today let's enjoy them in all their glory. At the start of the 19th century, zoos didn't exist. London had permanent menageries where the animals never left their cages. The finest of these was on the second floor of a ramshackle arcade in the heart of the city, and an Italian-born menagerist named Stephen Polito owned it at his death in 1814. In those days, most people couldn't venture far from home, so enterprising showmen loaded their animals into wagons and toured Britain with their travelling menageries, zoos on wheels, if you will. The most famous at the start of the century was Polito's travelling menagerie. We have no images of Polito's famous travelling menagerie because photography had not yet been introduced. But Staffordshire potters captured its exterior in clay. This is what the menagerie looked like set up at a fair or in the town square. You're seeing the entrance. The animal wagons were arranged in a U shape behind it. A visitor climbed the stairs, paid admission at the red door, and then descended more stairs into the well behind, which you see here. There he or she would be surrounded on three sides by wagons holding animals stacked in cages. These cages were politely called apartments. The animals lived and travelled in them every day of their miserable lives. The brown boards beneath the wagons concealed the wagon wheels, and they also prevented visitors from sneaking in without paying. The glorious painted show cloths on the menagerie facade were designed to catch the eye. The elephant was the iconic menagerie beast, and here an elephant has centre stage. The proprietor's name, Politos, is atop that wonderfully wordy scroll that snakes around the show cloth. It reads, Polito's Royal Menagerie of the wonderful birds and beasts from most parts of the world, lion, etc. What more could anyone want? On the platform, bandsmen wear gaudy costumes. In an era with very little public music, that brass band was a major attraction and it lured the public to the menagerie entrance. The lady at the door would have collected their admissions, and typically it was 1 shilling for ladies and gentlemen, but working folk, servants and children only paid half. Don't miss the lamps lighting the menagerie entrance and the monkeys and birds displayed to lure the public closer. For collectors, the big question is, when was this menagerie made? Polito died in 1814. His menagerie continued, but it restricted its travels to the north of England, Scotland and Ireland, and in early 1823 it went to Europe and never came back. It seems reasonable to assume that this menagerie was in production by 1814 and perhaps continued to be made for a few more years. It is a complex, impressive structure, about 13 inches tall and 9 inches wide. To enable trapped gases to escape during firing, large holes have been cut beneath it. Menageries of this form are dubbed the small Politos, and only 11 are thought to survive. Most are on brown bases, but some are yellow, as we see here. All the bases have heavy clawed feet, and all these menageries are believed to be made by a potter named Obadiah Sherritt. With this small Politos under his belt, Sherritt took things one step further, and he made a larger model, a large Politos menagerie. This is the large Politos. The first thing to catch your eye are the people on the steps. These occur on a few of the small and large Politos, but they are by no means typical. In fact, some large Politos were made without steps at all, as you see here. Notice how the steps were made in a separate mold, a separate block, and added to the front of the menagerie, whereas on the small Politos, the steps were integral to the platform itself. Aside from step issues, this large Politos appears very like the small Politos in that it has the same facade and the same 5 characters on the platform, but the major difference is that the menagerie platform itself has stretched and it's about 3.5 inches wider. This enabled it to hold more people, which have, in this case, been knocked off and lost. Loss is a problem again and again on large menageries. With apologies for the blurred old photo, this is what a large Politos looks like with all the figures in place. Sherritt also made this menagerie on other base forms that he's thought to have introduced slightly later. Here it is on a brown table base with plain feet without claws. And notice that tiny couple in the center. I think they're just charming. Anyway, the large Politos also occurs on the same base painted in a lighter palette as you see here. Another minor tweak on the large Politos is that red entrance door is always open. Sherritt probably made this modification to improve ventilation during firing. Anyway, with this wide platform, the sides of the platform have an emptiness to them, which certainly bothers my eye. I find the compactness of the smaller menagerie far more pleasing. I think the emptiness bothered Sherritt too, and perhaps using this very different base was an attempt to address that. It certainly did not give those lateral figures any more protection, and the figures here are also replacements that have become part of this menagerie's history. Perhaps one of the final menageries in the large Polito series is this example. Here, Sherritt added 2 tall structures that I believe represent lights to either side. They filled that vacant space and protected the lateral figures. I wish I knew exactly when these large Politos were made. They may have been made concurrently with the small Politos in the second decade of the 19th century and probably into the following decade. But in the 1820s, with Politos gone and George Wombwell's Menagerie the preeminent show, Sherritt again adapted his menagerie model. He introduced a large Wombwell's Menagerie, which evolved to become the largest earthenware structure of his prolific career. It is convenient to think of this as a successor to the large Politos, but the models may have been made concurrently for a while, and perhaps the large Wombles continued in production into the 1830s. The large Wombles evolved gradually. The easiest way to create a large Wombles was to simply change the title of the large Politos. This menagerie is just like a large Politos, but the word Wombwell has been squeezed into the spot that the word Politos once occupied. This menagerie is in Brighton Museum's Willett collection, and it's the only one of its kind. Structurally, it's just like the large Politos, but the painting on the facade is exceptional, and despite the damage, it is just gorgeous. Strangely, the base and the rear were not painted. The base had clawed feet, so it's one of Sherritt's earliest bases, and it hints at a date that could predate 1820. The next evolutionary step was a major one, and it gave us this large Wombles format. Let's look at how it was done. Focus first on the showcloths on the facade. On the left is a Politos model, from which the large Wombles on the right was derived. First, Sherritt removed that lengthy title band, and he left only enough to accommodate the words Womble's Menagerie top and center. In its place, he extended the showcloth upward, and he topped it with a canopy of sorts, quite a chunky one, that was suited to holding larger animals. This new showcloth structure got very tall, so Sherritt moved it down so that it rested directly on top of the door to the menagerie. In the process, the lights across the front moved down too, and one is obstructing the door while another is sitting on a bandsman's head. Also, Sherritt tidied up the sides of the facade and placed tall lamps to either side. These extended all the way down to the platform, so they helped fill some of that vacant platform space. This new facade is almost 2 inches taller than the old one, and it's wider, but it still sits well on the same platform, and it's better suited to accommodating figures at either end of the platform. This menagerie is big and heavy. In fact, it weighs in at over 8 pounds, And as you see here, it's too big for my amateur photo setup. One other important structural change occurred. That traditional house-like structure for the top of the menagerie was abandoned, and instead the menagerie comprised 2 sheets of clay placed closely together and joined at the sides by those tall lamps. I expect Sherritt held his breath when this costly, complicated structure was fired, but it seemed to work, and its slight wonkiness today only adds to its charm. The back of this menagerie has been painted in an unusual way, and I sense the painter enjoyed his task because he even painted the underneath in the same manner. I love those drips of blue-tinged glaze clinging to the edge of the base. Large Wombles menageries are very rare, and today only 2 others of this form are known. This one has steps in front. It has the same cast of characters you'd expect on a large Politos, but here the display appears fuller and busier without that open space on either side. The other has steps with people on it, and it has 1 additional bandsman on the platform. This was achieved by removing the wall that is customarily to the right of the red door. That same modification was made on the large yellow Wombles we looked at a few moments ago. In each case, freeing up that extra bit of space accommodated the addition of 1 more bandsman. Lastly, there is this one lone variant of the so-called large Wombles. It stands on a platform that's only about the size of the platform used for the small Politos, but curving out the platform sides helps it accommodate the larger backplate, those lamps, and 1 more figure. So today we've looked at 3 menagerie variants, and all are attributed to a potter named Obadiah Sherritt. But there is one other menagerie form. It's a little Wombles menagerie, and we don't know who made it, and we don't know exactly when it was made. By 1815, George Womble was England's preeminent menagerist, and he remained so until his death in 1850. Small Wombles menageries like this one may have been made before the Sherritt-type menageries, or perhaps they were made concurrently. But one thing is certain, to my eye they are the most beautiful of pottery figure groups, and for me, this menagerie is a perfect eyeful. This menagerie is 8.5 inches high, so it's small enough to be held in your hands, and doing so never fails to transport me to the fairground of old. And in case you haven't guessed it, this is my favorite menagerie model. As you see, the menagerie was constructed very differently from the Sherritt ones, and it has an open cavity behind it, so it could conceivably have served as a spill holder, but I think it was intended to be purely decorative. The banner around the frontis reads, "The largest collection of animals, Womble's immense menagerie of wild beasts, etc." I have traced 36 menageries. 10 are in museum collections in the UK, and nearly all the others are in North America. 14 of them are actually in private Texas collections. Menageries are desirable, they're rare and they're expensive, but if you want one, don't despair. That small Womble's menagerie that I like so much recently changed hands in a Brussels street market for a mere €100. Again, I am Myrna Skolny, and you can learn more about early Staffordshire figures by reading my books. Also, please visit my site, mystaffordshirefigures.com, which provides a wealth of information and a free download of my latest book titled Obsession. And remember, my help is always free, so if you have questions, please email me at this address.